Welcome to Free Thought Matters, and today the theme of our show is really Science Matters. I'm Annie Laurie Gaylor.
And I'm Dan Barker. We are co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, producing this weekly talk show and working on many other fronts to educate the public about non-theism and the vital need to support the constitutional principle of separation between state and church. Join us today or ask for more information at ffrf.org.
And we're very excited to have as our guest today Ann Druyan. Ann Druyan is an award-winning writer, producer, director, and science educator. You know her as co-writer with her late husband, Carl Sagan, of the original 1980s Emmy Award and Peabody Award-winning TV series Cosmos, A Personal Voyage. It's the most watched PBS series in TV history. Together they wrote 6 New York Times-bestselling books.
And those books include Comet, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors, Demon-Haunted World, Billions and Billions, and the Varieties of Scientific Experience. Ann Druyan was co-creator and co-producer of the feature film Contact. She was creative director of NASA's Voyager Interstellar Message Project and is founder and CEO of Cosmos Studios, where since 2000 she's produced acclaimed science-based entertainment, including Cosmic Journey and Cosmos, A Space-Time Odyssey. She was the lead executive producer, director, and co-writer on that series, which won the Peabody, Producers Guild, and Emmy Awards in 2014. And most recently, Ann Druyan has served as the creator, executive producer, writer, and director of the latest season, Cosmos, Possible Worlds, now airing this fall on Fox. So talk about someone who has stellar credentials.
And Ann, we're very proud that you accepted FFRF's Free Thought Heroine Award back in 1997. So it's so nice to speak with you again.
Annie Laurie, first of all, what an honor that was back in 1987. It was a joy to be with you. And it's wonderful to be back with both of you again. And thank you for the very generous introduction, and excited to be talking.
And that was 1997. That was just less than a year after Carl Sagan had died. And I think Contact came out that year. The movie Contact came out that year.
That's right.
And
That's right.
And at your talk, you told us some stories. I don't know if you remember, but your talk was so popular, the room was so full, it was a dinner talk, that you and I had to sit on this little table up on the stage, and we had to eat our dinner while everybody was staring up at us, which was a bit awkward. But you talked about the Contact movie and about your love for science. So you're not religious, but you seem to have an evangelistic fervor for science. Where does that come from?
Carl always used to say, when you're in love, you want to tell the world. And that's how I feel. I do have an almost evangelical fervor, although it's fine with me that there are people everywhere who do not believe what I believe. What I think is so important is the freedom to believe what our life experience and what our understanding of the findings of scientists and other people. It's so important that we are free to believe whatever we want to believe and not to believe at all. I love science because it's that permanent revolution that I've searched for all my life. That way of seeing and thinking that is not ever finished or complete. And what disappoints me about so many other ideologies is the kind of arrogance of believing that we know everything there is to know when we are so young and so new to the universe and only just beginning to study it systematically. So for me, science satisfies not only that sacred searching that I think is so important to life, but also to that sense of the glory and beauty of nature and its importance and why we should value what is natural above all other things.
So you do talk a great deal about the awe that nature inspires and science inspires. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why science education is so very important. For example, right now during the pandemic with climate change, evolution.
I think, as citizens of a society that aspires to be democratic, we must all be informed decision makers. We require a kind of critical framework to know when we're being lied to. And as far as I know, science provides that methodology for getting at what's real and what is merely the things we want to believe, the lies that we tell ourselves, the lies we tell each other, the lies that our leaders frequently tell us. We have to have some way of winnowing out the stuff that just isn't real. And, the reason that I think science is the best methodology for doing that is because you can't lie your way to Mars. Science delivers the goods. Science, in just 4 centuries, from Galileo's first look through a telescope to our current apprehension of thousands of worlds that circle other suns, to our creation of interstellar spacecraft that are now in the shallows of the interstellar ocean. Think of that achievement. Why couldn't we do that 1,000 years ago with our religious beliefs, or 2,000 years ago? Because we didn't have that error-correcting mechanism that told us when we were going horribly awry. And that's why I love science and why I wish that it was the birthright for every single child and adult on Earth, that we could all know how to tell fantasy from reality, and that if we loved reality the way so many of us love fantasy, I think we'd have a better chance at surviving this very dangerous moment in our technological adolescence.
I remember the original Cosmos and how exciting that was. I was just coming out of the ministry and I was reading books, and here's Carl Sagan on TV explaining these things in such a wonderful, he was like a lovable older brother or something. And you participated in that too. You were a co-writer. I remember particularly one scene, if my memory's right, where he was standing by a tree and he looked up and he said, "You and this tree are related. You have a common ancestor." And the first time in my life I thought, whoa, we humans are not just one-off creations. We're part of a huge web. And so you know what I did? I immediately joined the new Planetary Society that Carl started. I was a founding, in fact, I still have the issue #1, volume #1 of the Planetary Society. That was instrumental. Your educational efforts were instrumental in me continuing my thoughts. And I bet there are millions of people who are going to say the same thing about your series. Maybe talk about that a little, and then about the new one, the new Possible World series that is just coming out right now.
Oh, I'd love to, Dan. First of all, thanks for that wonderful memory. That's the great gratification of doing this work, is to attract people who might not have known that they were interested in science to a scientific perspective. That's the joy of it. Yes, the new season, the latest season, is called Possible Worlds. Cosmos Possible Worlds is also the title of the companion book that I've written. And, it continues that tradition of not only conveying the stories that make it possible for each of us to own what many people think of as complex scientific ideas. We are a story-driven species. I am not a scientist. So for me, the doorway into so many ideas, including, the most abstruse scientific ideas, like quantum reality and the search for life in the cosmos and other intelligences in the cosmos. All of these things, it's possible to really own them and to become more powerful if there's a doorway into the idea that makes it your own. And that's, I consider that my life's work. So Possible Worlds is realistic about the dangers that we face. It's an exploration of the lost worlds of planet Earth, the civilizations of which we know so very little, but also an examination of the extrasolar planets, the worlds that circle other suns, and what might be waiting there for us. It's also a voyage into the human future. And because I have a kind of optimism about our future in a very dark time. And I like to think that it's not just wishful thinking or pie in the sky, but something based on who we are and where we come from. So it's a big topic, Possible Worlds, but I hope it's a collection of the most inspiring stories that I found in the last several years.
So we have a little clip of it that's very intriguing. Could we play that?
I'd love for you to play it. That would be wonderful.
I know of only one non-human symbolic language, and only one instance when we humans made contact with a life form that uses it. Their knowledge of astronomy and mathematics would astonish most of us. Their commitment to resolving their differences democratically and reaching the broadest possible consensus through debate is unparalleled by any human society that I know. Tens of millions of years ago, they had been carnivores, but they gave that up to become vegans. It changed their world and resulted in surpassing beauty wherever they wandered. They are explorers who use their symbolic language to tell each other about the things they've discovered on their travels. This is their night sky. I want to tell you their story.
Now that's a cliffhanger.
Do we have to wait to see it?
You have to wait to see it, but, I just say one thing, and that is that sequence, that episode was made possible because of the inspiring genius of a man named Charles Darwin, who broke the shackles that imprisoned us, our thoughts, our ideas, when we believed that we were created separately from the rest of nature. What a curse that was, that idea. And so I love this episode. It's actually my favorite one. I'm so thrilled that you chose a sequence from, this is 307.
Well, Neil has that same likability and approachability that Carl had, and he's excellent at connecting with an audience. We have to take a break, Anne, and when we come back, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your life and your work with Carl. Druyan, the science educator, the stellar science educator and author, will be right back after this break.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
I'm Charlotte, and I'm an out-of-the-closet atheist. I've always been intrigued by religion, and when I was younger, I desperately wanted to be religious, to be more accepted by my family, who was in majority Catholic. My parents didn't raise me religious. I was never baptized. I never took communion. Well, once I took communion, it was a pretty bad idea. I don't think it was worth a church full of angry elderly who glared at me as I waved the communion wafer back and forth asking my grandma what should be done with it. Also, the wine was pretty gross. From this experience and countless others, I came to 3 conclusions that sort of dictate how I live my secular life. One is that I find people of faith to be more exclusionary and less accepting. 2 is that I would rather work to please the people around me who I care about than someone who, to my knowledge, doesn't exist. And 3, that I would rather help people than pray for them.
And welcome back to Free Thought Matters. We're continuing our conversation with Ann Druyan, the best-selling co-author with Carl Sagan of Demon-Haunted World, Billions and Billions, creator and producer of the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, who is an atheist, who played an atheist, by the way, in that show. And so welcome back, Ann, to the show.
Oh, it's great to be with you both.
So Carl's book, The Varieties of Scientific Experience, that came out posthumously, you wrote, it was either a foreword or an afterword, I forget, an eloquent, very moving examination of Carl's last days. And, you know, a lot of people say people like Carl Sagan and Charles Darwin and Luther Burbank had deathbed conversions. That was not true with Carl. And you know, I almost get tears when I read what you wrote about how you were saying farewell to each other. Can you explain a little bit about the end of his life, and well, his whole life even?
Well, you know, what I wish people knew about Carl was not only his brilliance, his scientific genius for being the first person on Earth to understand the planet Venus, its temperature, its surface, and coining the phrase runaway greenhouse effect, a principal investigator in every single mission of the first decades of the space age from 1957 till his death in 1996. A poet, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, a social activist, all of these things. But the last 2 years of Carl's life, he faced 3 bone marrow transplants, which in the 1990s were, I think, even more horrendous to experience than they are now. And during that time, he wrote The Demon-Haunted World and Billions and Billions. He faced his death with such courage, equanimity, like a samurai, never a question of like, why me or anything like that, but what do we do next to hold on to this precious thing called life? And I think if people understood his personal heroism and his loving kindness to his family, to his children, to me, to our parents, he would be an even greater hero. We knew that we were saying goodbye forever. Neither of us ever entertained the notion that we would be reunited, because that's why we lived every moment of those 20 years we spent together like the great gift that it was. I mean, if you think that the universe is 13.8 billion years old, and the future of the universe is perhaps 100 billion or 1,000 billion years. For that one little 20-year moment, we got to share, as Carl wrote, a planet, a world, and an epoch, a time together. That was the wonder. We didn't waste a minute together, and that's what comforts me more than any illusion that I'll ever see him again.
So Carl didn't get to see Contact. He doesn't get the information now that we get from the Voyager, but his legacy lives on. And I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about the Voyager.
Well, I'm so proud of them because they're the most distant objects ever touched by human hands. Both of them performing flawlessly the first close-up reconnaissance of the worlds, the planets and moons of the outer solar system, taking that pale blue dot image, Voyager 1, from out by Neptune. Carl's brilliant idea, and of course his heart-wrenching meditation on the meaning of that tiny 1-pixel Earth and the responsibility that we all have to preserve it. But still, we are in constant contact with both spacecraft, which are now beyond that place where the wind from the sun ends and the interstellar medium begins, flawlessly communicating back and forth over some 20 light hours. Think of that achievement. It's really, in my view, an occasion for human self-esteem that we have been able to accomplish this.
So almost one light day then away from us.
Almost a light day away.
Wow.
And still starting up when we send a command across the light hours, immediately responding once it receives the command. Wow. This week, we are so clever as a species and so silly, so foolish in so many ways.
Well, that reminds me of the book that you just mentioned, Demon Haunted World, that you and Carl worked on together during those last couple of years. What are the demons that are haunting our world today?
I think a number of things. I think xenophobia is a very serious element of our demons. Superstition, which is merely false pattern recognition. Letting our fears, our projections, our own self-hatred, which has been inculcated into us by various traditions. All of this sickness that we have perpetuated out of a sense of duty to our ancestors and to those who came before us. There's so much evolutionary baggage and cultural baggage, misogyny, a fear of women, a hatred of women, all of these things. These are the issues that we have to come to grips with now that we understand them, now that they've been demystified. And instead of uncritically accepting the myths and the legends, let's appreciate them for their historical beauty, but let's move on and see clearly and act accordingly.
Wasn't
to what
it?
the scientists
Was it
telling
Carl?
us.
Was it Carl or you that called science a baloney detector? Was that your phrase?
Actually, it was neither of us. It was a very dear friend of mine and Carl's named Arthur Felberbaum, who had a much more extreme left-wing view of the world than Carl had. And I remember the conversation the three of us were having, and finally Arthur looked at Carl and said, "Carl, we want the same thing. We want everybody to have a baloney detection kit." And that was the beginning of the very famous baloney detection kit that Carl articulated.
Yeah, that's a great line.
So, Anne, how are you faring in the pandemic, and has it had an impact on Cosmos Studios, on your upcoming work?
I've been super lucky. I'm home in a place I love. I've been here since March, and I have no complaints. I'm really lucky. Some of my kids are across the road, so that's a great feeling. And I just wish everyone could have a place as peaceful and beautiful as where I am to endure the pandemic safely. It hasn't really affected Cosmos Studios. I just think of the nearly 250,000 Americans who have perished, and the worldwide toll of over 1 million people for something that was preventable and didn't need to result in so many deaths. And I think it's this once again, this lack of respect for logic, for evidence, for science that has led to the deaths of so many and endangered the rest of us.
So we have about 30 seconds left here. Time goes by fast. We participated in a Day of the Dead, a secular Day of the Dead, in which your daughter, Sasha, participated, honoring her father.
Very touching.
And she's an author, too. Doesn't she have a book out now?
Yes, a fantastic book called For Small Creatures Such as We by Sasha Sagan. Just a brilliant writer, wonderful daughter, brilliant wife, mother, but someone who has that gift for communicating in a way that's not pretentious or obscure, just brilliant, full of feeling. I urge you to run out and buy For Small Creatures Such as We. It's a tour de force.
I can't imagine where she got that gift.
Well,
And you've taught us that science works, and what an absolutely timely message for today and for the future.
Well, thank you for joining us today,
Thank you.
Andrienne.
I'm so glad I did. Hey, let's not wait until another, 23 years before we get together again. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
We did too. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching Free Thought Matters.
Because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.